Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with Superlative Podcast. Please listen to aBlogtoWatch's other show, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest is Frederic Gasser. He's the president of B.R.M in the United States, I guess maybe North America. Frederic, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today.
So before we started, you were saying that you began this venture in 2004. Is that when B.R.M was founded, or was it founded before that?
No, B.R.M was founded at the end of 2003. So initially, Bernard Richards, the founder, started a manufacturer company in 1986. And the purpose of that company was to produce in-house, outside of Paris, some product for mostly the Richemont group. So Dunhill, Cartier, and Van Cleef & Arpels. So everything from cufflinks to clocks to pens to whatever they have on CNC machine, tooling an hour away from Paris, that was Bernard was doing. At the end of 2003, from a passion of racing, motorsport in general, he decided to start his own company, B.R.M.
So for those that don't know, B.R.M stands for Bernard Richard Manufacturer. Bernard is the founder. But Frederic, you've been working with him on the watch brand, it sounds like nearly since the beginning.
Yes. And he really started from an interesting way because I saw an editorial in a magazine in France, and I pitched him. I left a voicemail in the company and said, "Hey, would you like to have an adventure in North America?" I always wanted to have some kind of experience in the U.S. This is a country I always enjoy, and I started to come here when I was a kid. I love the skateboard. I love Hollywood. There's a lot of things we kind of bond with me here. So he reached out back to me, and we have a dinner, and we connect through motorsport. I used to race dirt bike as a kid, and kind of bond to that, and come to Dallas because I have relatives. And with few watches in my pocket, which is allowed me to have. And obviously, at the beginning, nobody really wanted to see me. I went to most of the usual name in Dallas in that regard, but nobody, it didn't stick well. But I was initially in my life a media planner. So I reached out to all the print media, which was pretty big at that time. And IW, Guy Kurtvalis, gave me my first editorial, which was showing in the magazine in September 2004. And from that spec, I got a call from a guy in Miami. We wanted to buy one of the watches. So he said, meet me at this place. I'll be in your area. And he sent me an email with all the information. And I borrowed a car because, you put into perspective at that time, I barely have money. I don't have visa. So I was not supposed to work here, right? And I don't know much about watches. But so this guy contacted me, and I borrowed a car. I went to that meeting, and I arrived on the parking lot of a jail 2 hours away from Dallas. And the guy shows up. He was a criminal lawyer. He bought the watch. And from that, I started B.R.M. I incorporate B.R.M. in Dallas, Texas.
Wow, that's such a great story. So let me go back a little bit. I'm interested in that. Yeah. You said that you did that phone call. So did you see the brand advertised, and then you liked it, and then you wanted to say, "Let me represent you in the United States"? Is that what happened?
I saw a watch. I saw the first watch he designed, which at that time was named the reference GP44.
Okay.
And he was very detailing. He was very different. He has his own personality. So I picked on it, and I thought it was interesting. and it's all connect to each other. I mean, so suddenly you see something and you feel like I can do something with this, and I don't know how to explain that, but that's the chemical reaction I had when I saw that watch. And from that, it was a phone number, and I called, and that was it. That was the beginning of the story.
So what was on his mind at the time? What was he talking about? Like, you were excited by this watch. What was, he just started this brand as a supplier. Like, what were some of the things, if you remember, that he was excited about, worried about? Like, I'm just trying to understand his mental state at the time.
Well, I think, so Bernard's parents, in the late, after World War II, started a watch company called Richard Ziegler. And that brand was very successful for, I think he was one of the first watch company in France to advertise in Vogue. I mean, it was like Jean Marais, Jean Cocteau, all the luminaries of that period were wearing the Pounds brand. And unfortunately, they lost the company in some point. So I think in his head, he always wanted to start something different, but be successful and representing his love for motorsports. So but I think he didn't really have the vision of going crazy right away, So. And that's what happened. We come up with a model. It was a skeleton. It's called the V12 Racing, and it was skeleton with the strap with a checkerboard, black and white, woven together. And
I remember it.
Yeah, it was 25 pieces, and we sold out in 6 weeks. And so that kind of create confidence, and then we, open one door at a time. I remember. My first big pitch in the US was Thanksgiving 2004. I was invited to a party, and I had been introduced to someone. We were very interested on my watch line, and in my head I was going to sell a watch to someone, and I was happy. But he gave me his business card, and it happened that he was the VP of Neiman Marcus. And back then. Neiman Marcus was trying to develop NeimanMarcus.com.
Right.
And none of the watch company they were having in the store, which was some pretty prestigious name at that time, wanted to be online. And we have this big meeting, which was completely unexpected on my part. I thought it was just one-to-one thing, but then I faced 6 people on the table and start talking about what I was doing and the brand and the background and everything. And he said, this is what's going on. We can't find any luxury watch company to go on NeimanMarcus.com. Would you be interested? And then Neiman Marcus back then was doing only consignment. So if you wanted to be in the store, you have to, put 10, 15, 20 watches on consignment. And I said, well, I can't do consignment. You have to buy 15 watches, and I do it. And they put the trigger. So that was my first big move in the United States. And the
congratulations to Neiman Marcus.
Yeah. And that started in 2005. But back then, buying a $10,000, $15,000 watch on internet was kind of unusual.
Yeah.
So even with the Neiman Marcus brand, to back up, it was not something. People were willing to do. So they start to go to the store and ask for the brand.
And what year was this?
2005.
Okay, 2005. Yes.
Yeah, early 2005. We signed the deal with Neiman Marcus at the end of 2004, and they start to put everything online during 2005. And after that, I have this kid from Miami. We just keep calling me, and he said, you need to come to our store, and I promise you we're going to do something together. And because he was looking at the brand and from Neiman Marcus, and he was David King from King Jewelers.
Right.
And I started, and he was selling, the first 6 months, he sold, I don't know, 40 watches or something. I mean, he was very passionate about the brand, and every customer were going. Yeah, so it was a big success, and then started to spray, step by step. You open Los Angeles, and you open New York, and you open different places, and then suddenly you have 30 doors, So that was until the recession happened, and that's changed a little bit of everything. But
well, let's talk more about the formation and founding and stuff like that before we get to the modern era.
Yeah.
I guess how much of the watches is actually built by the manufacturer? Because you said that it was, Bernard's family was a supplier, had capabilities to produce certain things. Obviously, you don't make most of your movements. I don't know if you make certain parts, but help people understand what is actually produced in-house, maybe what was then, maybe what was now. I think you have the word manufacturer as part of the brand. Help explain how much of a manufacturer the company is.
Yeah, so we basically manufacture. We have a little bit between 15 and about 15 CNC machine in-house.
Wow.
Which allow us to from a piece of metal. It can be titanium, it can be stainless steel, it can be aluminum, it can be macrolon, as the article you provide to us lately. And we CNC everything, so we can make our own screws. We have a tiny CNC machine. We give us the access to manufacture our screws. All the parts, like in a B.R.M watch, the lugs are made separately and applied and screwed to the case, just to have a better sense of mechanic. The case, one block, pressure, crown, everything is made separately from one piece of metal. And after that, as you said, we use some Swiss movement most of the time, 2824, 7753. Which we modified in-house for most of the skeleton version. Everything is kind of updated in-house on the base of 7753, because those movements are not very appealing, I will say.
Right out of the box.
If you go to the room, so you have to make some changes to make it more interesting, I will say.
So there was certain parts that you were able to make, which gave you a lot of flexibility. And I want to talk about the design ethos. Now, I've been to the track a few times, not nearly as much as you. You used to race, and obviously Mr. Richards himself is very much into it. But when you go to a track, you see certain things that you don't see off the track. You see flags. You see really, really bright colors. You see all these bold signs and dials and things like that. And this sort of world of racing watches is really inspired, in my opinion, from literally being on the track. Would you say that correctly identifies where some of the designs or most of the designs come from? It's obviously car related, but it's less a watch trying to be a car or like a car, though there is the suspension elements, and more about being at the track. I guess what I'm trying to say is help explain what people are looking at when they see the designs and where the direct inspirations are.
Well, initially, if you go back to 2004, we were one of the first watch company. We been very focused on colors. Like most of the watches, we bring red, lime green, purple, yellow, etc., etc. And all those colors, as you said, are coming from racing, because if you go to a track, you have a lot of colors. And that was the appealing and the recognition of what's happening on the racetrack. It's very colorful. So we try to bring that to our watches. Like even the hands of the watches are a reminiscence of the pedals. That's why we have holes on it. We will try to design and manufacture something with authenticity in regards to what we see in motorsport.
talk about some of those things that you see for people that haven't necessarily been on the track or in that environment. Help them connect. I mean, obviously, there's differences between the various B.R.M watches, but there's a shared design language. So for people that don't know where that comes from, help them understand. If you went to the track, you'd see maybe these colors here. You'd see this type of thing here. Obviously, the flags are a big part of the track, and depending on the race, that's a big part of it. But I think when people see the design, if they're not part of that world, they don't really know where it comes from. Maybe you can point to specific things in that racing context that you could see immediately. I mean, again, I want people to understand what you're trying to do with it, because I feel that if you're not there in that world, it's hard to understand why you make certain choices.
Well, I mean, if you, I think today everybody are watching Formula One for probably the first decade. Formula One start to be successful in North America. They've been trying for a very long time, so I think now they're here. And I think the success of F1 really push also the traffic on multiple racing series in the United States. But if you go to a track, what you see, you have numbers on every cars, and the numbers is usually around a circle. All the cars you see has different wrap because everybody wants to have a very strong feature on there, or message or advertisement, and then you go to the paddock and you see garages, and you see engine, and you see race brake, and you see all those parts. Which help you to create some design and also material. I think like we've been using Macrolon for since the beginning. We have some issue back in 2000. I think we first started Macrolon in 2005, but we have some water resistance issues. So Macrolon, it's a polymer. It's what you have on the windshield of the helmet, also on the lateral windshield of the race car. It's very strong. Now everybody talking about Sapphire for the last few years. Everybody is on it, but Macrolon is much stronger than Sapphire, but also lighter, and offer also something very clear, because the first Macrolon case we did was very opaque, so you can really see inside. But now we find a way to polish it, so you can really create something similar to Sapphire, a little bit cheaper, obviously, but also the durability is there. And that's a material very well connected to racing. And after you have the design aspect, like, if you look at a B.R.M V12, for example, it looks like the piston of a car. That's the shape that we took that from that. So sometimes it's not possible to recreate something from what you see on the car, but that's pretty much a place to design stuff. And the wrap, for me, the wrap of a car, it's amazing, because we can recreate that into a dial, and we have this ability in-house to do some engraving. So like we can engrave the racing number on the crown. We can really create something really well connected to a racing team and you have that on your wrist.
It's always struck me that the brand has a lot of parallels to Richard Mille. Obviously, very different companies today, but
yes,
I feel like both companies came out of the same appreciation, were sort of inspired by what they saw in the racing world the same way, a combination of the cars, the track, the lifestyle. And obviously, the companies obviously diverged and went very different ways. Richard Mille got very much into sort of the extremely high-end celebrity, still about the racing world, but not necessarily as focused. And
performance-based. Yes.
Performance-based.
Yeah.
B.R.M, I think you've had a couple of different models here. I think there's like maybe an aviator, but for the most part, you've really consistently stayed within your sort of lane as a racing watch. Was that a specific intention? Did it just sort of end up that way? What is sort of, again, you've been around for, 25 years. What is it about the racing world that has been so attractive that you've just done that and resisted going in really different directions as many other brands have?
Well, I think when you're small, you have to be you have to pay attention to the cost of changing direction or developing a new area. And I think Bernard tried to approach that with the golf in some point. Because we have this, we pattern that system where the movement is protected by some active shock absorber. So basically, it allows you to have some hard shock or hard vibration on the wrist, and the movement will be protected, which is always a challenge when you play with a nice watch, play tennis or play golf. Usually the mechanism is not made for that shock. So we kind of create that. The problem is every time you try to go after a new segment, it takes a lot of investment and time. And then you have it or you don't have it. And the money you're going to put on that segment is the money you won't be able to put on the motorsport part. Except if you have a phenomenal growth, or like Richard Mille, for example, which allow you to diversify and touch a little bit everything because you can. At my standpoint, in regards to the U.S. market, which I've been on charge, it's a matter of I prefer to spend 100% of my time on something I can optimize and keep optimizing than to try to diversify and start to lose 25, 30% or 40% of what I spent over the last 15 years because I'm trying to get into something new.
So that's very interesting. So you're saying that being able to do a less number of things very well has proven to be more effective than trying to participate in a lot of areas in a non-fully committed way.
That's right. Yeah, I really, that's my vision. That's what I prefer to do. I prefer to sell less, even if we talk about price point. Even if you increase like 10%, I think it's better to do that and reduce the quantity than to try to get. I'm not big in volume. I never really like volume. Like I can't sell $1,000 watch. I will never be able to do that. So I think you have to stay where you feel comfortable and what you feel good about.
The racing world obviously has a lot of events, as does other worlds like golf or whatever. I believe that B.R.M has found that participating in those events personally, being there on the race days, on the track, interacting with the other fans, that seems to have proven very, very effective, being part of the crowd rather than just selling to the crowd. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, completely. at the end of the day, we are human. We need to connect with each other. I think when you start to speak with someone on the one-to-one, you create a contact. You create something a little bit different than just something on the internet or whatsoever. I think, and you find passion. The people really enjoys to have you here and talk about something you love, and you transfer that passion. I think it's very hard to communicate something like that on an advertisement or via internet. I feel like when you see the person in front of you and you have the watches and you explain it, and it's an engagement, and it's emotional, so I think it stick to to people like that.
Now, I remember years back going to Basel World and often seeing B.R.M and walking by and sometimes meeting with you guys, but always seeing the watches, always loving to see you around. And I think as a media person, what you also notice is that people have very strong opinions about watches. And B.R.M, from the beginning, was very much a divisive brand. Like, you either loved it or you didn't like it. And at the time, and I think it's very important to say this, was a very exciting evolutionary period for watches. Big, bold statement watches at all price points, especially high-end, were very, very popular. It was not the case that B.R.M was particularly unique in offering that type of like visual splendor. Today, tastes have changed, trends have changed, and we're at a place where, again, it's almost a legacy of a time that could come back, but is no longer there in sort of the trendy sense. I guess my question is, talk about who is into these designs. I like them. I think there's a lot of parts of the world, especially in more central parts of the United States, that people like these designs. But talk a little bit about the polarity, because I'm sure ever since the beginning, and showing at the shows in Europe, there's been this contingency of people that love it, and these contingency of people who think, what are you doing here? I can't look at this. And again, same thing with Richard Mille. People have the same polarity there.
Yeah, yes, but I think that's your message, and you do something. It's your personality. You love what you do. And after, people accept or don't accept. But I think, as you said, people like it or hate it, and I think that's good. I think that's a good balance. You don't want the so-so. You want, I love this, I like today to see that I have customers, they have 10, 15, 20 B.R.Ms, over the years. I like to see that. It's better than to have multiple people with just one, and never use it. So I like that the response of the market towards our brand. They are very passionate. They love it, and every time we do something new or they want something specialized, then they contact us and we do it. And I think that's the main things today. I think we launch. I think the configurator, and that's going a little bit outside of your question, but in 2005, we were one of the first one to launch a configurator when you can customize your own watch, and it was not as crazy as it is today in terms of detail, but at that time we have so many colors and so many possibilities, so why not? But also that creates, that passion towards the brand. It's obviously it was bold. It was like, I remember going to some event and people was like, 44 millimeter. That's, but now it's kind of the average, right? 44 millimeter. It's kind of the norm, I do remember in some point we come up with a V8 engine, so it was very big. But as you said, it was back in 2007, 2009, everybody was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You never see your wrist with your watch, right? So I think, but I've seen people buying that watch. And they have very tiny wrist. I have to make a very tiny strap, but you can, it was just so taking all over the wrist on the watch, but they love it, and some other, as you said, hate it. They don't get it. And that's okay. Again, we make 1,500, 2,000 watches a year. So we're not looking for volume anyway. We're not looking to reach out to 10,000 watchers. So I think as long as we still have, 15 to 2,000 people around the world, we are willing to purchase a B.R.M. I think we're good.
Movado introduces the Heritage Kingmatic, a sleek timepiece that brings back the golden age of 20th century mechanical wristwatches when design and distinction were everything. The original Kingmatic was debuted in 1952 as a self-winding dress watch that remained in the Movado catalog for nearly 3 decades. The modern Heritage Kingmatic is directly inspired by a cushion-shaped Kingmatic design from 1962. Movado offers multiple cosmetic styles of the Heritage Kingmatic, each with a 35mm wide steel case, legible dial with beautiful Dauphine-style hands, and a Swiss-made automatic movement assembled at the company's manufacture in La Chaux-de-Fonds. Movado invites you to discover the Heritage Timepiece collection today as the company celebrates both the 70th anniversary of the original Kingmatic as well as the 145th anniversary of the historic Movado brand. Discover your next timepiece at movado.com. What are some of your favorite things about B.R.M's designs that, and this is really mostly a technical question more than aesthetic, that you've developed? Because there's been all kinds of special little things. Using the macrolon for a lot of the watches is one thing. I know there's certain types of suspension things. There's the visual designs, but a lot of the time there's these like little technical things, it's sometimes hidden. You can't really see it. Talk about some of the actual innovations that B.R.M has introduced, or some of the interesting features that are existing in a lot of the models, but maybe people don't notice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said the macrolon. I think the macrolon was I think a very interesting material to work on. And in some point, we were trying to figure out how to make the lightest watch in the world. We came up, obviously, the macrolon was a light material, a skeleton dial, because then you reduce material on the dial. And then after, we have to work on the lugs and the pushers and the crown and trying to figure out something super light. We took titanium and we skeletonized all those parts. And we tried to figure out a strap. We were very thin and very light. And we come up with a watch with 48 point something grams. I think for a small company like us, I think that was pretty cool to come up with that. And we had some good recognition over this, and I think after that we come up with another model still based on the macrolon case, but with kind of an isolastic system on the back, on the rotor, to avoid the rotor to go crazy when you have some very hard shock. So we create that isolastic system on the rotor itself, and then some shock absorber around to just overprotected the movement against any kind of shock and vibration. But if you put that in perspective, I mean, we have 4 watchmaker, and we are 20 people in the house, right? So to create those, like we create our own tourbillon back in 2009 with a cage at 9 o'clock, and it was a tourbillon automatic on the 48 millimeter case. Obviously, it came out at the wrong time because it was recession and it was pretty hard to move those timepieces. But we've been trying over the years, since we started, to come up with some new ideas and innovation to add to a movement to make it a little bit different than anybody else.
What's the average price point right now? Is it about $13,000 or something like that?
We start around $5,000-$6,000 for an automatic, which you can customize. So you can pick your case, you can pick your hands, you can different variation. And then the chronograph start around 8,000-9,000. And then you go to some skeleton movement. We are around 17,000-20,000. And so the price point, I will say 5 to 45,000 today.
And over time, have you found that the American watch buyers changing the price points they like? Do they sort of maintain certain levels of spending that they appreciate? Has it gone up or down? I know that we're in an economic recession for the most part, and people who like watches still like watches, but maybe want to spend less. From your vantage point, working in the American market so closely and obviously working for consumers, talk a little bit about their elasticity for pricing, as well as the stickiness of loving watches through, again, economic ups and downs. Because at this point, you've seen the watch market through at least 2 big highs and 2 big lows.
This is correct. I do think today I don't have much reference in terms of market because I changed my platform of work. I think the first I will say 50 from 2004 to 2016. I will say I have a wholesale platform. We were doing okay. I mean, very good at the beginning and okay at the end. And then I started to convert into more bespoke. So I have no account in the US today. I just work on the one-to-one. I custom everything. And that's the way I kind of survive the process of changing. Because niche brand, if you go back to this area of 2004 to 2009, it was this appetite of new. And then the recession happened, and every retailers pretty much convert into more big brand to have the security of it, the marketing security, the marketing production, the production security, So and then we've been pushed on the side, step by step, year after year. So just to survive that process, we have to figure out a new way to move product. And I think the way I've been doing it was collaboration, creating something unique. Like, last year we did a partnership with Monte Cristo, the cigar, for the 90th anniversary. We did 35 watches. I think it's our job today is to be very creative and try to observe as much as you can and find ideas. It can be on the magazine, it can be on the racetrack, it can be connecting with somebody on the street. But that's the way I've been moving forward since 2016 pretty much.
I want to talk a little bit about this relation with retailers. It's something that I'm currently studying, and I find it to be kind of interesting. In general, I think that there's a lot of problems in the United States when it comes to retail. I think that retail, I get the bigger picture is in an ideal capitalist environment, a retailer should be able to make all their own decisions. They should be able to decide what they sell, who they sell to, the price points, because they're reflecting what the market can sustain. In the United States, it doesn't really work that way anymore. If you carry a big brand like a Rolex, a Patek, maybe something from Richemont or Swatch, these groups are not allowing you as a retailer to truly act autonomously. They make all these restrictions on you and all these requirements. You have to buy a certain amount. You can't do this. You can carry these brands. You can't do that. And for the most part, many of the powerful retailers in the United States are now restricted in being able to respond to what I call changing market conditions. And this is a major problem. But part of this is that these brands have been threatened by having too many competitors in the store. So a brand like a Rolex that provides, I guess, a good amount of ongoing sales, has the power to say your store can't carry them. And this doesn't mean that a smaller brand is not selling or doing well with the store, or that the customers don't like it. It's that this other account, who is kind of a bully, says, we don't really want them in there, or we're going to go elsewhere. And so B.R.M, as well as honestly dozens of other companies, have been subject to this strange sort of set of politics that makes it hard to work with retailers, not because the retailer system doesn't work, but because there's other companies in there that are so threatened by the competition, they actually destroy the free market system in order to protect what they think are their interests. Would you modify that statement at all?
That thing started a long time ago.
Sure.
And I think he accelerated during the recession, but it's also, the retail went after those big brands because it was easy. If you carry Rolex, you don't have to push the product. People come and buy Rolex, and they pay and they leave. You don't have to work, basically. You just carry the financial headache of carrying those brands, okay? But if there is brands, you go to the show and they're going to give you order, you just sign it, they ship it to you, and that's it. That happened a lot, and some of the retailers decided to stop because of it. But then they're going to lost. Look at what happened. I don't know if I should all say all of this, but AP, for example, decided in some point to shut down every retailers in the country. So you have some young independent retailer who lost 40% of their sales in just a year because of the decision. Richard Mille did the same thing, in some point. Richard Mille opened a few doors, and it was a big investment for some of those guys and it takes time to build a network for that level of watches. And then suddenly they have a phone call that they can't have it anymore. So yes, it's disturbing in many ways, but I think it's also the choice of the retailers initially. I think we start as B.R.M, we start to have, we are taking dust in the store because the store didn't want to push the brand because they have too much financial involvement with other brands, and you just, and then after that, the trick is to call you and said, well, I have 10 watches in stock and you need to take back 5 and give me 5 new ones. And then you start losing money as a niche brand, and you can do it. You just arrive to a point when it's not sustainable financially for a niche brand to work in a retail environment. Because I think if you don't multiply the inventory at least 1.5 to a year for a niche brand, it is not worth it for the niche brand to be involved. So it's better to sell direct, and obviously if you look at the big picture too, the retailers get screwed by the e-commerce because every single watch company today has an e-commerce. And then you add on top some website like Chrono24 or eBay or whatever, and it just, I think we multiply the distribution by 10 suddenly, and you don't have that amount of consumer anymore to digest all that distribution. It's not that special. We're probably the only luxury segment to discount product.
Watches, you mean?
Yeah. I think Watchland today, it's if you go to Hermes, there is no discount. You're going to buy your Birkin for $20,000 at the store, not anywhere, at the Hermes store, and there is no discount. If you want to buy, a nice watch, you go to a retailer, is going to give you 20%, 25%.
So let me comment here. I think this is interesting. And I actually think this is more of a cultural difference than anything. And you've lived in the US long enough, so I think you get it. In America, a discount is not seen as a cheapening tool. In America, a discount is seen as something that makes the consumer feel positive. It's sort of like I like you. I want you to feel good about this purchase. It's part of the service more so than it is about discounting the quality or the value proposition of the good. But in Europe, discounting is seen as this like almost immoral thing. It's like this ugly, weak, you shouldn't have to do it. And I think that there's a big difference because, again, the ways that discounting functions in America, again, is to help make the customer feel good. It's not about cheapening the product itself. Do you agree that there's at least a cultural difference between how discounting works in the United States and the perceptions in France and Switzerland?
Yes, that's certainly true. But I think in the US, he went too far, and he went too far because I don't think the retailer. I think the retailer will enjoy not discounting the product because he will make more margin, right? And
in theory,
right? But the thing is, they have to, as you said previously, they have to provide numbers. If they don't sell enough, then they get stuck with the inventory, and it's just the performance they have to provide. Sometimes it's a little bit too much compared to what the market is value in reality.
I continue to find many of these cultural differences to be what controls these relationships more so than what actually makes sense for the market. Because the American retailers, yes, they want to sell, but they also have longevity in mind. They want to maintain relations with consumers. They want to sell to them again and again. They want them to buy a lot of the same products. Yet, even though they have some of the exact same goals as the brands themselves, from a strategic standpoint, there continues to be this difference between how it's done in America and how maybe some of the Swiss and Europeans want it. And we're never going to come to a conclusion in this conversation, but I think it's true to say that a lot of the conflict in this space simply is the Europeans wanting to do things the European way in a country that has very different customer expectations, norms, and practices.
I mean, I think in Europe, everybody is looking at the US as a very high profile consumerism, and the expectation is always big. Any European company we want to start is looking at the US as heaven, but nobody is really understand that market and how difficult it is just to penetrate that market.
Yeah.
And to be established and recognized in that market. And after to entertain the brand at a level, then, as you said, you can look at long term. So a lot of watch company, I mean, I'm sure disappear, in the last 2 decades. Like some company we were very high in some point, very hot, are completely gone.
Yep.
And I think it's just it is not necessarily about the investment, because some of them invest tremendous of money in this market to try to be successful, and has not been able to stay for very long. It's a very tough market, and I think it's always, except the big group, we understand more marketing and all that stuff. But for small company, we wanted to evolve here. They don't really understand it initially, and their expectation is always high because they see from their own perspective in Europe and try to feel like, oh, this is a market where we can really generate revenues. And yes, it's possible, but it's very hard.
I want to expand on that a little bit because it's, again, such an important point. You've been in this market for a while. You found a way of doing business that you like, as you said today, basically working exclusively directly consumer. What would you say to some people who in this market, in the world, be like, okay, China, difficult, not really growing, seems to be stuff there, but I don't really know how to get in. Europe has instability issues. The Middle East has stability issues. Everyone's sort of looking at the United States. I mean, there are parts of Asia as well that are doing great, but they're looking at the United States as being like the big important market. But as you said, people aren't quite sure how to approach it. You have people who go to just one city like New York and think they got the entire United States covered. You have people that, put the same amount of people and time into the United States as they would a smaller region in Europe, like Sweden or something like that, and be like, oh, the markets are the same size. Talk about, again, speaking to an audience of Europeans who potentially want to do more business in the United States, give them a reality check. Tell them what's possible in the United States, but very explicitly tell them what to expect. What do they have to face when coming to the United States? What are the real challenges outside of those first few pleasant conversations with maybe a couple of supportive retailers?
Well, the question will be to say what I'd be doing today if I have to restart from scratch, and I don't know what if I will make it today, because when I first started, first the print media was very powerful. The retailer were very open to niche brand, and that market was kind of isolated. It was the US and it was its own territory. Today, social media, print media doesn't exist or barely exist or barely survive. Department store collapse. Look at what's going on with Saks and Neiman Marcus right now. So there is a lot of changing, like really tremendously in the last decade. I don't know. I think you have to find your niche, and you have to be very focused on it. You have to find your way, basically, and it is not. You can't say Rolex is doing this, so I'm going to do this. I think you have to find your own way, and that's your own creativity. It's not like something you find in a book. I think you have to observe, find your path, and stick to it until something came out of it. But I think it's more emotional than just a business plan. I never really believe on business plan. But I think today it's more accurate than anything. You just have to find your little road. I remember when I have few reps working with me way back. I was always telling them to think outside of the box. You just can go after the retailers because all the brands going after the retailer. You have to think different. And I think as a small company, you really need to today. You can't depend on social media because you get lost. If you don't have 1 million followers, you kind of trying to get something, so before, you get editorial on Rob Report, you get editorial in IW or Watch Time, and it was kind of not necessarily easy to get, but you can get it. Cigar Aficionados. You have some major magazine in the US. We're even powerful outside of the US. And every time you get something, you are getting phone call and you can sell stuff. It was just a little bit easier, I will say, than it is today.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. I think that's an important point to make out. And what I'll describe about that era of those publications was that you and other smaller independent brands like B.R.M were effectively able to benefit by riding on the coattails of the investments that the bigger brands are making. It's not the case now, but Rolex and all these were effectively making sure that those publications were in business, and they had extra bandwidth to cover the the fun, interesting guys. Now those investments for them don't exist anymore. So the type of large media publications that exist at the time that could offer you, free coverage if you were cool, are no longer around, because the money that was there to support them initially now needs to come from smaller guys like you. And it was never part of your business model to invest heavily in media. You were sort of started at a time where you could, again, if you were kind of nice and cool and had something interesting once in a while, could be covered essentially for free. When given the proposition that you have to not only make the watches and sell the watches, but also pay for all the awareness, that introduced a cost that, again, you were not really expecting to have to handle and maybe can't afford to begin with.
Right. Yeah, agree.
How important is the United States for B.R.M? Obviously, it's a brand based in France. You have sales internationally, but how important is the U.S. For the overall brand?
In terms of sales, it represents about 30%. But I think there is more to it. I think every time you do, depends on the collaboration, again, you work on. But everything you can touch here can become bigger than anyone else.
Are you saying the potential here is more?
Yeah, I think here you have, the celebrity, the athlete. Everything around the United States can be so big compared to any other place in the world. If you have luck to reach out to someone famous, then it's a worldwide recognition. It's a worldwide advertisement. Everything here can become big for a brand. Is no doubt.
Yeah.
A race car driver. You can. I used way back. I used to work with Patrick Long, and you get to those drivers, or you get to a celebrity standpoint, and suddenly you go past the United States. You go to Europe, you go to Japan, you go to it can be big just by having the right person here.
And speaking of having the right person here, how important is it that you are in the United States? Obviously, you've been here for a long time and you didn't, you were here, but it seems to be that today, having someone like you in the United States is crucial. There's a lot of brands that want to do well in the United States, and they don't have a person in the United States, maybe not even an agent. They don't have inventory. They're trying to do business in the United States by selling watches one at a time online and expecting each of them to go through customs, maybe even to pay, even for customers to pay tariffs. And again, it's another cultural difference. In America, nobody likes to pay tariffs because we don't have a history of paying VAT. Yes, we have sales tax, but we don't expect when we get something in the mail, there's something extra to pay. Maybe in Europe and other parts of the world where the VAT has existed longer, that's something that they're more accustomed to. But I think it's really, really important to say that if you're going to do business in America, you need to have a presence. So going back to my question, how important has it been for B.R.M that you are personally, you're in Texas and in the United States?
Well, I don't see you can accomplish brand development without having someone physically involved in the country. And this country is obviously big. And we kind of reconnect to what you were saying earlier about, connecting with people on the racetrack and everything. I think as human, we need to connect with each other. The brand needs to have a face. I think you create a certain form of security when people know that you're here, and you can, even as a repair situation, somebody break his watch. Well, I have someone in Dallas to fix it, right? You need to provide a service too, and they need to rely on you. They need to be able to see that if something happened, you're here. and I think that's the important part of it. I think if you buy 10,000, 15,000, I mean, obviously in the watch land is not that much, but it's still a lot of money. And I think if you can back it up in terms of service, when you need service, I think it's a problem too. So having physically someone and a US company, especially, I think it's important.
And what are some of the next steps you're going to do? We're almost out of time, but I'm curious about what the world right now looks like to you. The brand was represented at Watches and Wonders. You have a booth there, which is great. Is the goal to get more retailers? Is the goal to have, more a relationship with consumers? Are you planning on maintaining the product the way it is? Are you working on new types of products to respond to different types of tastes and expectations? Where is B.R.M investing right now, and where are you going?
Well, I think obviously new product. I think there is some material we would like to perform. So we're working on it, and you'll be the first to know, I promise. And in terms of retailers, I'm not sure. Again, I have the last few years experience in that platform was not that great. So if I can find someone we are very well connected to the brand and are willing to push it in the right way, I'm open to it. I think we did Watch and Wonders because I think we haven't done a show since 2017, and we wanted to check it out, to see what it is about and what type of response we can have from it. And it's a very interesting show because you basically have 3 days with the professional and 4 days with the public. So we were very busy. I think the last 4 days was the public appearance, and obviously some retailers we were finished to work with the other companies. But I was not particularly interested on retail. For me, Watch and Wonder on my hand was more about connecting with media, see what's going on, get a little bit of a new perception of what the market is, because again, we haven't done any watch show for a long time. But as far as I'm concerned, in the US, I just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't want to change anything as far as today. Just finding new collaboration and develop the brand that way. And if on the way I find some one retailers or two retailers we are interesting on carrying the brand and do the right things, I'm definitively open. I know it's important. I know it's good to have a window. I think the future will be to have a store, to create your own experience and have a store in Paris and a store in the US somewhere. I mean, that would be, a good move. But we're still independently owned. It's still family business. So we don't have the stretch of, and the help of others. So we have to go slowly.
Thank you so much. The website is BRM-chronographs with an ES, the French way.com, where you can go and check out the latest B.R.M watches. This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Frederic Gasser, U.S. President of B.R.M. Frederic, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ariel, as always. Thank you.